My name is Jeannie Nelson. Tagausinya is my Nupiaq name. I originate from Lake Minchumina. It's the largest lake in the interior. We find these quite often on the beach. If you look at these artifacts, people lived here, they figured 2,500 years ago. We come from people that survived. They hunted and trapped. This is native land. They had potlatches here. People traveled here, and I'm sure they enjoyed it. You know, they enjoyed the fish. This is where we gain our identity, you know, it's from Lake Minchumina. And it's an Athabascan word. It's called lake, they called it Lake Minchumina, and it means lake people. That's where the lake people lived. My mother was Hazel of Yugana. She was from Wainwright. Her mother died at an early age. When she turned 13, they took her for high school, and she went to Klutna, and she never went back. She was very bright and incredibly beautiful. My dad, Blackburn, was from Idaho, Utah, in that area. And when he was 12, he had a calf and he named it Alaska. I think he liked to get away. He liked the wilderness. He came up here in the Army. He was an Alaska Scout. So they met, fell in love when he was in Anchorage. And then they moved out to Lake Minchumina. My dad helped build the airstrip out there because it was war times. If they needed planes around and they had to land, Minchumina would be the place because it was geographical center of Alaska. He loved it and said, this is where I want to live. So they moved out there, bought a little cabin, and then he added, like they do in the bush, he had a bigger cabin that added onto that another room and added on another room and made himself a lodge. There was the FAA, because that was part of the runway. It was people that came in every 2 years and they'd leave. And so they lived that lifestyle, and we lived the trapping lifestyle. We came from that little teeny log cabin with a dad that trapped and a mother that sewed our clothes. We had a perfect life out there. Mother would get food from up north, like muktuk and kuak with salt. She would cook and cook and cook and cook on the wood stove. I remember looking for my dad coming back from a hunting trip because I knew he had tongue, moose tongue, and that was my favorite food. That was our life, picking blueberries, picking cranberries. And then we'd go and fish the net. Get pike and suckers and whitefish. That's when I learned to cook the dog pot. And then we'd go feed them. We played with the dogs. They were our friends, our toys, you know, we just loved those dogs. We'd go for rides, it was a real treat. But Daddy would swear at the dogs, you know. I mean, when you're out in the woods, those dogs have to obey because it can be life or death, you know, and so he had his language. And one day my mom said she found me under the table and I was saying all these words, you know, and I'd heard them, you know, and I knew they must not be good. And she goes, let's just call that dog team language, you know, and I thought that was funny. My dad paid my brother, Jonathan, and I $1 Martin to skin them. So I became an expert. And you just peel those skins off, you know, and whatever. My mother would tan the skins that he got, and she'd make the clothes for us. So we'd have like decked out, I had a rabbit parka, with a Wolverine ruff and mucklucks. It was incredibly amazing, the clothes that we had. And she took great pride in taking care of us. Jonathan and I, we'd take the dog team to get our wood. We'd cut it and split it. And so we hooked up the dogs, and I was a driver. The crunch of the snow, it was beautiful. And the moonlight, incredible. We did that, just kids. We built a little cabin. Bolo did most of it. Jonathan and I got one of those things and we pulled the logs up the hill, big logs. Until that was finished, we had to live in tents. And Jonathan and Bolo had a bigger one and they had a stove. And so I'd go over there and I would just entertain them or do whatever I had to do to stay in there because it was warm. And then when it was bedtime, I'd run over to my tent. It was a mummy bag, it was army mummy bag, so I would quickly get in there and shiver until I got warm. I wasn't afraid of anything. There were wolves and whatever out there. And we'd go check the traps. We went to Snohomish Lake, Whitefish Lake, and Star Lake. You can only ride so long because the dogs can't pull you, so I'd do a lot of walking. And I just walked along and I saw the snow sparkle and the mountains were incredible against the blue sky. And halfway across, I took out an almond joy candy bar and ate it. It was heaven. That's an experience that's embedded in my mind, like, wow, I know what the trap line is like. To this day, I say, every time I go to Fred Meyer's and I see an almond joy candy bar, I can go right back to that place. During that time, it was fun, but there was a lot of alcohol and drinking. And as kids, you basically accept it. We just lived. We lived our life. And then one day, my grandparents came to visit. They got off the plane, and I've got a picture of them. Grandpa has this big fancy hat and a trench coat, and Grandma has this pillbox hat and a purse and high heels. I thought, what planet? It was totally different. And they probably thought the same thing. But they wanted to see us, and they loved us. And they went every place within the boat, for picnics, whatever. But every night, we'd clean off the table and light the gas lamps. And my grandpa would teach us about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So Mother learned. And then they left, so we knew them, and they loved us. They wrote every week to us. Later, my parents divorced, and so we were all separated, and that was really hard. We moved back and forth. We lived in Lake Minchumina and Manly, Oregon, with my relatives, and Fairbanks. And that's when I went to 3 different schools. Poverty was where it hit home to me. We didn't have any money for food. So Jonathan goes downtown, and Jonathan told me, he says, I knew it was going to have to last. So I bought frosted flakes, because I knew there was sugar on them. And then I bought powdered milk, and I knew that would last for a while. There were experiences like that. They had a rummage sale at the Catholic Church, and I went with my mother, and there was this pink coat, and I loved it. And so it was 75 cents, but it had this big, maybe an iron indention in the back. My friend came up to me, she says, you're wearing my coat. Nobody wants to have somebody say that to you in 6th grade. My mother, she was fishing in Tyonek, and they came in for a visit to Anchorage, and she was staying at the Lane Hotel. And there was somebody in Anchorage that was going around setting fires. And he came to the Lane Hotel and started a fire and killed 14 people. And my mother was one of them. So when she left, as a family, we had to come together, and so we came together at Lake Minchumina because that's where we originate from. We all grieve in different ways. She was our link with our culture. It wasn't an easy thing for her being the first Inupiaq church member because she didn't have any friends. So it was a conflict for her. But she had a belief in God and she shared that belief with us. And because of that, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't use my dog sled language, well, sometimes. But anyway, so I learned, I learned how to have stability in my life. And that was very important to me. My brothers and sisters, there's Rodney and Daryl and Bolo and Carol Lee, me, Jonathan, and Dixie Seven, yeah. And then we went to school in Lake Minchumina, and Daddy shot a moose. It was opening day of moose hunt. So we all went down there, and all our friends heard, and they all ran down there. And Daddy was butchering the moose, and we were like, wow, look how big the heart is. That's the liver, and he's showing us all the parts. And that big school teacher came huffing down the road. You kids belong in school. You get over there now. And that was the way the whole school year went. He told Jonathan, sometimes I'd just like to slap your face and knock your head off. He said that to that fourth grader. I said, John, that's pretty scary. He goes, yeah. And he says, I took my pencil and I sharpened it on both ends. And I kneeled down at my desk like this. And when he'd come by, I'd take that pencil and put it horizontally in my mouth. So I was covered. Finally, school was over with and he got on the plane and left. Then went to school in Manly Hot Springs. And the teacher, Mrs. Dart, she would draw these beautiful chalk things on the board, and she just was animated, and I loved her. We loved her so much that we had 3 years of no tardies or absences. She was a veteran. She taught us manners. She taught us respect, like you don't litter. One of us did, the other picked it right up like we'd done some sin. And she was incredible, just incredible. We had the most wonderful Christmas programs. The whole village would come. I looked at her and I knew that's when I wanted to be a teacher. I want to be just like her. I want to be a teacher. Then went to high school in Vail, Oregon, and went back to Minchumina summers. But that was my schooling. I went to all sorts of different schools. And when I finished school, then Randy came along. His roommate said, there's an Eskimo girl over there you should meet. And he came to our church meetings and he'd bypass everybody to get to be with me. And when he walked me home once and he goes, what do you like to do? And he goes, I like to fly fish. Well, in my little lusk mind, those moose flies that we have, I looked at him and thought, you use those flies to fish? We just use lures, We got engaged. He was the best possibility of a dad for my kids I could have found. We got married in the Idaho Falls Temple. His grandfather married us. And we had, I think, $25. We had to think about what we're going to do. We've got goals. And then he said, well, you can get a job up at the ski hill. And I said, okay. So I went up there and I did rooms. And it was a fun job. I had friends and he did the maintenance. And one day I came home and I said, Randy, it may be fun now when I'm young and vivacious, whatever, but I don't want to be a maid when I'm 50. And that kind of sunk in. I said, I'm going back to school. And then he went back to school. When I graduated from college, he went to Barrow with me, and I went up there and had the wonderful blessing of teaching the children of the North Slope. I incorporated the culture into the class and had wedding captains come. I got to write curriculum for the Smithsonian Institute, and I did a Cupid parka design trim, the fancy work on the bottom of the parka, and it's all geometric, and so I developed one lesson in that. And then I taught school in Tanana, and I loved Tanana. When I taught at U Park, I take pride in the fact that I think I did 350 elders into the classroom. That was one of the best things I did. Made sure they got there, they had rides. Ruth Grant was one of our recognized elders. She came and did fry bread. When pulling came, she had moose leg, and she went to another class. And Jeannie, who's my teacher friend, blonde, blue-eyed, she's walking behind Pauline with this great big moose leg, you know, like gristly and everything. She has on her shoulders, she's just walking around behind Pauline. I thought, that's the way it needs to be. You know, we need to honor, honor our lifestyle. And other people need to have the knowledge so they can too. And then I became the coordinator of Alaska Native Ed at central office. It was fun, with the Alaska room and all the kids and going in and helping the A&E people. And I joined the recruitment team with the school district. So I'd go to the job fair and be able to see that we've got a Native teacher that can teach Native kids. Those kids are so precious. I challenge the kids to write. For my generation, we were teachers. We saw the teachers in the villages and we wanted to role model and be teachers. We know the value that we had in the school district. And then I retired, and at my party, they said, "What are you going to do in your winding down years?" Well, I was thinking, I'm not winding down any. I just didn't go moose hunting because I was teaching in September. So I went out moose hunting. Loved going down the river, loved the air, loved the tent, loved everything. I had practiced on the 30-30 without a scope, so I knew I could hit stuff. Then I got up early and I looked out the window in the kitchen of our cabin, and there was a moose out there. And Randy was like, "Come on, let's go." "Come on, what? Come on, let's go." So we got on the four-wheeler and we couldn't find the moose. And so he said, "You go this way, I'll go that way." And I thought, what do I do if I see it? And so we went and we tracked it down, and it was looking at me like, "Jeannie, this is your turn." I emailed my friend and said, "This is what I did in my winding down years." I love that story. It's every much as valuable as my job was. It's a slower paced life. You get to look at the weather and just live a different element, a different realm. My next story, it was the most painful part of my whole life. Everything else didn't compare to this. Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act passed. And I got this paper, I still have it, the brochure that said you can have land. I filled out the paperwork and I thought about it, and my brothers and sisters thought about it, and we could have applied up to ASRC, but we were Minchumina-ites. See, that's the thing, is Minchumina was so important to all of us. And I've thought sometimes, why? I thought, this land is so incredibly beautiful. The mountains, the peace. We were with our mother then. And so anyway, so we said, we're going to be Minchumina-ites. And we were a native group. If you're familiar, there was the villages, and then there was the native groups. See, we had to be the majority of our locality, and we had to be separate and distinct. The BIA came out and did a research on us, and they certified us. But there was this group called the Homeowners Group. One person said, we moved to Minchumina because there were no indigenous gatherings. And another one said, if they get this land, it'll ruin our stoic society and we'll have government handouts. It was just painful and hurtful. And then you were dealing with this contention And we were kids, you know, we were just trying to make it in life, just starting out, so we really didn't know what was going on. They started to appeal us. You know, they had highfalutin lawyers. They took my dad, he was a white man, and the husband of the other Native person. They said, they can't count, they're white people. So they didn't take them out, just take them out of our group. They counted them as them because they were white people. So my dad and the other husband counted against us. And when they picked on me, it was because I was 19 going to college, first year college. And they said, she's too old to be a resident. Well, I had to do a whole appeal on just me to say that in Alaska you could go to school and you could still be a resident. And they didn't count my sister. She got a degree and there was no school at Minchumina, so she went to California, taught a year. The day school was out, she flew back to Minchumina. They didn't count her. My little niece was a year. She was there at Lake Minchumina when exit was passed. They said, we'll use the 1970 census. They didn't count her. And yet she was there. There were things that they did that I think our attorney should have said, look, there's something wrong here, and he didn't. And so we were extinguished. We were nothing. There was no negotiation. Like, we'd have gone down the Muddy River rather than give up nothing, you know, or we'd have gone over to Jim Lake and settled. But we didn't have those choices. It's just bizarre to me. And back to our lawyer, he says, we'll take you to the Supreme Court. And I said to him afterward, I says, what now? And he goes, I guess you're just the bastards of Anxa. What really should have counted was that my mother was an Inupiaq, and she chose to live in the interior, and we're her children. In my life, I'm a survivor. I survived cancer. I survived an aneurysm. That was big. Survived my parents divorcing 3 times each. And I was sexually molested when I was little. And I got this from my inner soul, from the spirit that guides me, that it's not my problem. I suffer the consequences, sure, you know, but it's not my problem. And I can move on from that knowing that. My motto in life is, I can do hard things. I would recommend the next generation, we're going to go through hard times. I feel it. So if you learn how to be frugal. Out here, being frugal means using the things of the land, like moose, grouse, ducks. There's a duck right there. In rural Alaska, you have to maintain your things. Your four-wheelers, because they're your lifeline, and maintain your house. Watch what you buy. Your greatest asset is your kids. Anakarek, Kutuk, and Vugana. My kids, they are the best kids in the whole world. We've been very blessed that way with our kids.